When we hear the word slavery, our minds almost automatically go to images from the past. Chains, plantations, something distant, something that supposedly ended long ago. But let me make you an honest provocation, as if we were having a calm, unhurried conversation. What if slavery never actually ended? What if it just changed shape, became smarter, more acceptable, harder to recognize? The United States is the largest economy on the planet. The country that sells the world the idea of freedom, prosperity, meritocracy, and the famous American dream. But behind that narrative, there's a fact almost no one likes to face head-on. Today, around 1.1 million people are living in modern slavery within the United States itself. And no, this isn't limited to extreme human trafficking or isolated cases. We're talking about an entire system that traps people through debt, an absurd cost of living, precarious work, and constant fear. And before you think this has nothing to do with you, let me say this clearly: it already affects your life. And it has everything to do with money, investing, and financial freedom. To understand modern slavery, we need to stop looking only at the symptoms and start seeing the mechanism. In Brazil, for example, the most recent census data shows something curious. Major cities are losing population. And it's not because people are simply tired of big cities. It's because living in them has become financially impossible. Rent rising faster than wages, transportation getting more expensive, hours and hours lost in traffic, and a constant feeling of working hard just to stay in the same place. Now do a simple exercise with me. Replace Sao Paulo with Los Angeles, Rio de Janeiro with New York, Brasilia with San Francisco. Does the scenario change? In practice, no. In the United States, this even has a name: rent slavery. People who work mainly to pay for a roof over their heads, without being able to build assets, without room to breathe, without real freedom. They're not moving because they want a different life. They're being pushed out of the center of the system because they simply can't afford to exist there anymore. There's a very well-marketed lie that salary equals freedom. But in the United States, reality shows something different. Average wages grow slowly, almost always below real inflation, while the cost of living skyrockets at an absurd pace. The result is predictable. People juggling 2 or 3 jobs, living in debt, paying interest on credit cards and loans just to cover the basics, with no real ability to save or invest. This doesn't happen by accident. It's not disorganization. It's economic engineering. Modern slavery doesn't need whips or visible chains. It works far better with debt, fear of losing everything, and a lack of real alternatives. And when someone tries to leave this system by changing cities, jobs, or lifestyles, they discover that the cost of leaving is so high that, in practice, they can't. Now let's talk about hard data, the kind that makes people uncomfortable. According to the Global Slavery Index, there are about 1.1 million people living in modern slavery in the United States, which equals 3.3 people per 1,000 inhabitants. Proportionally, it may seem small, but in absolute numbers, it's the largest total in the Americas. And where does this happen? In sectors that are part of everyday life: agriculture, construction, hospitality, domestic work, the sex industry, and especially global supply chains. More than half of the victims are migrants, often without legal protection, directly dependent on their employer to remain in the country. This creates a perfect power imbalance for exploitation. They can't report it. They can't leave. They can't make mistakes, because one wrong move means losing everything. Have you noticed how we're always in a hurry, even when we don't need to be? You're in a mall, an airport, or a subway station, and the escalator is right there, clearly designed to make things easier, to move people without effort. Even so, many people walk up it. Not because it saves hours, but because standing still feels wrong. Like wasted time. Like laziness. And that's interesting, because no one ever sat you down and said, "Walk up the escalator, you need to arrive a few seconds earlier." You just learned it. Hurry became the default. Rest became guilt. And standing still, even for a few seconds, started to feel like a moral flaw. That's not an accident. It's conditioning. Productivity culture taught us that everything must be optimized. Every minute has to produce something. Every action needs a purpose. Every pause must be justified. You eat fast, answer messages while walking, listen to podcasts at 1.5x speed, and feel like you're saving time. But time for what? Most of the time, you don't even know. This behavior creates a constant sense of urgency, as if the world were always late and you had to run just to keep up. The problem is that this race almost never leads to more freedom. It only leads to more tasks, more pressure, and more exhaustion. You're not producing more to live better. You're living to produce more. Another silent habit is treating your body like a machine. Sleeping less becomes a point of pride. Eating poorly becomes normal. Ignoring pain, fatigue, and stress becomes a sign of commitment. The body stops being a home and becomes a tool, something you use until it breaks. And this is essential to the logic of modern slavery. A system that needs people functioning nonstop cannot allow them to listen to their own bodies. Fatigue becomes weakness. Rest becomes laziness. Self-care becomes a luxury. When you feel guilty for resting, the system has already won, without forcing you to do anything. Walking up the escalator is just a symbol. The logic is the same everywhere. Arrive earlier, respond faster, deliver ahead of schedule, always be available. Even when there's no clear reward, you do it, because being first became synonymous with value. But rarely does anyone stop to ask, what does arriving earlier actually change? In many cases, absolutely nothing. It only reinforces the idea that your time is never really yours, that it's always serving something or someone. Modern slavery isn't sustained only by low wages. It's sustained by people who've internalized the need to always be running. Maybe the most perverse habit of all is feeling guilty when you're not being productive. You take a day off and instead of resting, you feel anxious, like you should be doing something useful. Exhaustion, on the other hand, is celebrated. I worked so much today. I didn't stop for a minute. I'm completely exhausted. That became a badge of honor. A healthy society celebrates rest, creativity, and free time. A sick society celebrates exhaustion, because tired people don't question. Tired people don't plan. Tired people just survive. And survival is the minimum required to keep the machine running. The most sophisticated part of modern slavery is that it doesn't feel like force. It feels like choice. You choose to walk up the escalator. You choose to work longer hours. You choose to answer messages after work. You choose not to stop. But those choices exist inside an environment that punishes anyone who slows down. If this video is making sense to you so far, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos that can help you grow. Another scenario. The subway arrives completely packed. There's no room for anyone else. Still, people stand up, squeeze and push, hold their breath, and get on. No one does this because it's comfortable. They do it because missing that train means losing minutes, and those minutes feel unacceptable. It's strange how we've convinced ourselves that being crushed, without space, without air, without basic dignity, is acceptable, as long as it saves time. The body signals that something is wrong. The mind ignores it, because the system taught us that being late is worse than suffering. No one likes crowded transportation, but the fear of being late is stronger than the discomfort, the back pain, the stress, the mental exhaustion. Lateness became a sin. Arriving late became a moral failure. It doesn't matter how inhumane the transportation is, the blame always falls on the individual. That fear doesn't come from nowhere. It's cultivated. Companies punish lateness, but rarely question impossible commutes. Cities expand, traffic gets worse, transportation remains insufficient, and the responsibility is still yours. Figure it out. Make it work. Get in anyway. Modern slavery works like this. It doesn't need to break you all at once. It just needs to normalize small daily concessions. And once you accept those without questioning, you'll accept bigger ones later. The most frightening part isn't the crowded transportation. It's how normal it has become. That's just how it is. That's rush hour. You chose to live far away. There's always a ready-made excuse. And the more we repeat them, the more absurdity becomes background noise. No one stops to ask why millions of people have to live like this every day just to keep a machine running. No one questions why missing a train is considered worse than losing mental health. This isn't a system error. It's not an isolated failure. It's a direct consequence of how the system was designed. Modern slavery doesn't begin when someone physically forces you to do something. It begins when all your time, all your energy, and all your decisions are consumed just to survive. And that's where money, or the lack of it, comes into play. The problem was never work. Work is natural. The problem is depending 100% on your labor just to exist. The system works because most people have no margin, no savings, no alternative income, no time to think. And when you have no margin, you accept almost anything. You accept crowded transportation. You accept turning an escalator into a race. You accept always being available. You accept living exhausted. Wages are designed to keep you functioning, not to free you. They cover the basics, sometimes not even that, and keep you trapped in the short term. And here's the uncomfortable truth. As long as you only trade time for money, you're inside the logic of modern slavery. You might be well paid or poorly paid, but you're still dependent. Investing begins exactly where your paycheck ends. It's the moment you say, not all the money I earn will go toward paying bills. Part of it will go toward buying time in the future. When you invest, even a small amount, you're doing something deeply subversive within this system. You're creating choices. The choice to say no. The choice to slow down. The choice not to cram into crowded transportation because losing 5 minutes won't ruin your life. Investing isn't about showing off, getting rich fast, or living off passive income tomorrow. It's about gradually reducing the power the system has over you. Notice something interesting. No one teaches you how to invest in school. No one talks about compound interest, real inflation, assets, or wealth protection. But everyone learns to be punctual, productive, available, and resistant to exhaustion. That's not a coincidence. A system that depends on people constantly running cannot create people who think long-term. Investing requires patience, and patience is the opposite of the urgency pushed on you every day. Let's be honest, investing doesn't magically remove you from the system, but it changes the balance of power. That's how modern slavery starts to lose strength, when you stop being just labor and become an asset owner. At its core, investing is a quiet act of rebellion. It's saying, my future won't be decided only by urgency, debt, and fear. You may still work. You may still be inside the system, but not as a hostage. Because freedom today isn't about never working again. Freedom is knowing that if you need to, you can stop. And the final question is yours. Is your money working to set you free, or just to keep you running? In the next video, why your life changes after you save $5,000. Don't miss it.